Hey everybody, Corey Barlog here from Santa Monica Studio, and I'm going to do a little bit of an unboxing video for everybody. I received the Kratos God of War 2 throne statue at the beginning of making this most recent game. And it sat in my office for years as I kept telling myself, I'm going to unbox this and make a video of it, and I never did because I got really busy. But it was good that I didn't do that because a very wonderful organization, Awesome Games Done Quick, asked us to donate this statue for their most recent event. And somebody named Murloc actually gave an incredible bid, an incredible support for this fantastic organization. So what we're going to do is we're going to unbox this thing, and I'm going to sign it, and then I'm going to have other people box it back up because I am super lazy. But while I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about God of War 2, like some experiences I had on there, and just tell a few stories from the front, if you will. So let's go over here. Let's unbox this thing. This thing is gigantic, first of all. I believe it is almost as big as if you were to buy a toilet at Home Depot. This is the size of the box you're going to get, right? Or like an air conditioning unit or something like that. This is huge. So this took up a good portion of my office. So when I was directing God of War 2, I had no idea what I was doing, which is interesting because that's sort of a through line of my entire career, is that I really didn't know at all how to do the job, and I'm still every day figuring out how to do it. I never really wanted to be a director on games. I feel like I lucked into the position, but the reality is I think what I was doing throughout God of War 1, working with Dave, sort of set a lot of that up. And one situation I remember very specifically. So this is, by the way, a beautiful box, beautiful sort of packaging. To try to put something like this, but it is going to be a very interesting unboxing because I think I have to flip the whole thing over. So Dave came to me one day, and we had several conversations throughout God of War 1. One conversation I remember is we were talking about the opening for Max Payne 2, and just talking about narratively what they were doing with that hospital sequence and kind of going back and forth. And I just thought it was exciting that he wanted to talk to me about this stuff and that he actually wanted to listen to it. Little did I know that I think some of this was actually some testing to see, did I know what I was talking about, and did he even care what I was talking about? And he had come to me about 5 days after Peter Jackson's King Kong game had come out on the PS2. And he asked, hey, have you played this yet? I said, no, I haven't played it. And he's like, oh, you should play it. I'd love to talk to you about it. And that was a moment where I could have easily said, oh, yeah, great, yeah, whatever, and kind of blown him off and never really played it. But something inside of me said, you really should do this. I was intrigued. I wanted to play the game, but also I kind of felt like it's like an assignment from the director. That's amazing. So I went home and I stayed up 2 nights and played through the entire game. And went back to the studio like 2 days later and said, hey, I played it, I'd love to talk about it. And we kind of set up a time later in the day, and we just sort of had an informal conversation. And throughout the conversation, I started to realize that Dave hadn't even played the game. So I thought he was going to play it, and we were both going to talk about it. So it didn't really faze me because I just started talking about all these different things. And I didn't know at the time. And I don't know if this is even true. I've never actually had a conversation with him about it. I don't know if this was the moment where he decided, like, oh yeah, we probably should have him direct the game, the next game. But I know it was a very important moment for me. It was a moment that I sort of started to understand storytelling in a way that I had never understood it before. I had, was able to start talking about the character goal conflicts between Jack and Kong. Right, and the whole beginning of that game has this really cool opener where you're coming on the boat, and you basically end up losing some member of your group who is abducted by Kong, right? And then you switch to the perspective of Kong, who just abducted the member of your group and is running away, and you're playing as that character. And this concept is pervasive throughout the entire game. And at the time, I found it a little bit frustrating, right? I thought it was interesting. It was something that I had not seen anybody do very often, But I also found it a little bit frustrating because I felt like, well, wait, but what I want to do is go find this person, but now I'm playing as the character who's trying to take this person away. So I was getting sort of pulled back and forth narratively from a sort of a character goal perspective between these two characters, sort of very diametrically opposed goals. And, you know, the conversation went for about an hour or so, and we were just kind of going back and forth, and then that was it, right? And he was like, oh, cool, thanks. And, you know, afterwards I'm like, look, he told me to play the game, he didn't even play it. That's weird. But still did not suspect at the time that they were interested in me directing the game. But that moment, I mean, that discussion, that sort of playthrough began this sort of journey for me, right? This journey of actually really wanting to understand what is possible in our medium, right? That there are so many great things you can do with character development, with story, in the interactive medium that you really can't do anywhere else. And sometimes those things work, and sometimes they don't. And I think the people who worked on King Kong did an amazing job, right? I think that they tried something that was very different, and they might have run into a pitfall of like, how do you solve this problem of making the player want two different goals that are actually working against each other? And in that instance, they weren't able to, I think, solve that, but they provided me with an incredible, incredible education, something that I'm still kind of endeavoring to learn today. Wow, look at all this. This is beautiful. This is a very weird way that they've attached this. Not sure. Oh, okay. So that's how it comes off. It was actually attached with the bags first, and then they attached the two blades. Look at that. The blades are looking very nice. And they have this little peg that they go in so that they cross like that. That's fantastic. Working on God of War 1 with everybody, you know, that first like month while I was there, I really sort of threw myself into it. You know, I along with several other people, everybody was kind of working these sort of late hours, not because anybody asked us to, but because we were all excited. We had a Tokyo Game Show, which was going to be the first showing of God of War in 2003, right? And me and Richard Fogey, who was kind of the main combat guy at the time, had been reimagining all of the combat. So when I got there, the combat was very different. We redid everything, added the air combat, the juggles, the air catch, all of that stuff. And I remember very distinctly the night we were all staying at the office and burning the disc for Tokyo Game Show. So we were burning a disc that I can even picture in my head now, this sort of blank disc that says TGS 2003. And, you know, a lot of people from the team were there. There was a ton of people, and most of us were just standing around Richard Fogey's desk, waiting for the disc to burn and testing out, does the disc hold up? Do we get any crashes? Have we fixed all the problems? And, you know, I remember first feeling, as I looked around at all these people, that like, wow, this is the first time in my time in the game industry that I actually am excited, right? And feel like there's an opportunity that we're going to make something that is meaningful, right? And it's not like we change the world and move the earth or anything like that, but we're making something that we're all universally proud of. And it's like everybody who was there had the exact same feeling, or at least in my mind, they all did have that same feeling that this was going to be something special. And Shannon Studstill, who was the producer on God of War 1, actually kind of looked over at me and said, you know, hey, and at the time she still called me Barlog, right? She doesn't say Corey. She always said, hey, Barlog, you know, thanks for staying and helping us out with this. And I thought to myself, like, of course, why wouldn't I? Like, I would not rather be anywhere else but here, making sure that this is good, because this is the first time anybody's ever going to see our game. And, you know, actually it went very well at TGS. That was a very good showing, and it kind of began that process of people starting to talk about God of War, right? And, you know, 2 years later in 2005, we released it, and it did very well, which then launched us in to the second game, which begins with Kratos sitting on this throne in this armor as we sort of reimagined it. And I remember that while I was in the first year of God of War 2, you know, I had a lot of decisions to make, and I had no clue what I was doing. I had Eric Williams, who ended up being kind of the architect of Kratos and the bosses and our combat system, come to me at the end of God of War 1 and say, okay, so we're going to have to, so this piece, this is the piece right here on the throne. Look at that. And he comes to me and says that we're going to have to redo the combat system, because the way that it works is a lot of pull-down menus in Maya right now. Maya is the 3D program everybody uses to make models and also integrate into the game. But to create a character, you had to go through all these little drop-down selection menus, which made it very difficult to copy-paste, to kind of use a search function. So they had a whole new way that they wanted to build the combat system. And I said, okay, well, how long is it going to take? He said, oh, don't worry about it. It's going to take like a month or two, maybe 3. And I said, oh, great. Okay, that's fine. It took a year. And that was a very stressful year, because the whole year I had rewritten the game 3 times. So the first one was too big, second one was not very good, and then finally the third one was the one that was correct. But I also was struggling to figure out, from a level design perspective, where we were going to go and how we were going to kind of achieve this, because we hadn't really gotten a game that was completely finished yet, at least structured in an outline. So that was one of the more stressful. Look at this. This is beautiful. The detail on this is absolutely amazing. And it's really heavy. It's like 190 pounds. I'm just that strong that I make it look light. But yeah, it's definitely going to require a very sturdy table to present this thing. All right, so let's try to put Kratos on the throne. So that whole year was essentially me faking it through a lot of my decisions, and then also begging every single person to try and finish the work that they promised to finish quickly, at least close to the time that they told me, this is nice, it just fits right in here, to the time that they told me that they would actually finish it. And everybody was behind. Like, we all kind of finished the first year getting a bunch of our stuff done, but it was definitely behind schedule, and I had a lot of stress and a lot of feeling that I was an imposter and I was going to fail and that this was not going to be successful, and I was going to be the first person to mess this series up. And granted, it was the second game, but you don't want the second game to be the one that screws the whole franchise up. As we were kind of nearing that final stretch, we're seeing a lot of articles of people talking about the sophomore slump, right? The idea that a follow-up game is never really going to be as good as the first game. And in some ways, that's prevalent everywhere, right? That happens in movies, that happens in comic books and novels and everything. You kind of have that origin story, and then the follow-up story is really hard to engage and keep the emotional stakes, I think, the same. I know I was being chased by the specter, the phantom of people saying, what's going to be your Ashes reveal moment? First of all, spoilers for anybody who's never played the earlier games, but it's been like, years, so unfortunately I'm going to spoil it. Kratos is covered with the ashes of his wife and child, and that is a really big moment in the first game. That is such an incredible, like, oh my God, kind of moment. And, I was very nervous about, like, I don't really have a moment that can compete with that. And I wasn't, I think, mature enough in my career, or even as a director, I wasn't confident enough to say, I don't think you necessarily need to just chase that. So I searched for something like that and ended up, I think, having an interesting moment that I just flubbed due to inexperience, right? So the beginning of the game, where, another spoiler, it is revealed that Gaia, played by Linda Hunt, is the narrator and has been the narrator of Kratos' life, right? And that she is an actual character. She is a Titan who has been observing Kratos this entire time. And the idea was really cool. It was one of those ones where it kind of, when it comes to you, you're like, this is great. All right, I think I have something interesting here. We can really move the story forward with this, and we can have some really nice reveals. But I was in a hurry, and I didn't really fully understand all of the interesting things you could do with that, right? I ended up seeing a movie shortly after the release called Stranger Than Fiction. Probably not shortly after, it was farther after. And it was so beautifully written. And it was about a character whose life was being narrated, and then the wall sort of broke between the narrator and the person who was being narrated. And I realized very quickly that, oh my gosh, that's what I was missing. I was missing that connection between Kratos actually hearing or feeling the presence of this narrator before you reveal it, so it feels like that impact is much greater. And that sort of chased me throughout the making of this last game to make sure I never missed one of those opportunities. I learned a lot on God of War 1. I learned a lot on God of War 2. And I've learned a lot since then, even in the last game that we made. But I'm still learning. And I think that's something that anybody who wants to work in any creative field should understand. That you are never going to stop learning. You stop learning probably the day you retire, or if you stop learning, you probably should retire that day. Because none of us know anything. We know a little bit, and that gets us through, but the reality is we are all feeling around in a dark room trying to find the light switch, right? And there are a lot of fake light switches, a lot of false turns that you can make before you actually find the real light switch. It's never giving up and making sure you always try to find that one so that the lights can go on and you can realize, oh wow, that's it. That's what I needed to do. It's not an easy path. It is not a path without conflict or doubt or failure. In fact, failure lines the road to get to that point where you turn the light on. But it is about never giving up and seeing that so many of the opportunities that I've had throughout my career have all kind of been really sort of lucky situations, but lucky situations that either I consciously or subconsciously was able to recognize. So hopefully that helps anybody who wants to get into any of these things to realize that your opportunity may be right in front of you and you just don't know it yet. So always keep an eye out for that. And this thing is absolutely beautiful. There you go. Everybody says my signature is extremely sloppy, but it's intentionally that way. It's that way so that when I mess up, it still looks like it was meant to be. If I was a smarter person, I'd probably be a doctor with my terrible handwriting, right? All right, so that's it. This is the beautiful God of War 2 statue that we are donating to the amazing people at Awesome Games Done Quick. Thank you for watching this ad hoc unboxing video and listening to my silly stories about God of War.
PlayStation